Okay, for all of you that are listening, you're going to probably hear a couple of things. One is music in the background. Number two, I'm in a kind of an interesting setting here. I am not in our studio, it's just outside of beautiful downtown Richmond, Virginia. In reality, where I'm currently standing is our travel studio. I'm on vacation this week, but that is no reason that the show cannot go on. And so I'm here in a car just outside of Tallahassee, Florida. We've just gone through a hurricane, a tornado warning. So it's pretty interesting here. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to cover the material. Now, if you're watching this, obviously you won't be able to see this yet because we're not online with the radio station. Uh, okay, here we go. Don't mind me. There are too many moving parts here. Well, we'll make this work. You are listening to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. I'm happy to be here. I'm on vacation this week, and I'm broadcasting live from a rest stop, believe it or not, on I-10 just outside of Tallahassee, Florida. And we've just gone through what would you call that, a tornado alert? But, if you live in Florida, one of the things that happens, and I've lived here for a good many years, is you get used to the weather. And so I'm doing a broadcast here simply because this is just how the timing turned out. And I'm on my way down to the Tampa Bay area and could not leave early enough this morning to get there in time for this broadcast. All right. Now, what are we doing? Well, today, this is about holding your best accounts. Now, for those of you who are listening to this on IBGR radio, you can also watch this if you want to look at me. You can also watch this on our LinkedIn and our YouTube stations. And so for LinkedIn, you just go to me, William Eastman, or our parent company, GrowthWorks. I believe that's where you'll find it. On Facebook, it's ibgr.network is our business page, or you can just stay with with the radio broadcast. Now, for those people watching on LinkedIn or YouTube, LinkedIn or Facebook, we don't have our YouTube page up yet. It will be this month. What you can do is you can see in the chat area, you can see that I put in links and I put in links to show notes. So if you got any comments, please put them on. But other than that, let's get rocking and rolling. Now, for everybody, you need to go to ibgr.network. That's IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. And when you get to the web pages or URL or broadcast frequency, you'll go to resources on the top of the navigation bar, mouse over that. Then when you see show notes, click it. Now, when you get to show notes, you got to do a little bit different because of the nature of this broadcast. So what you need to do is scroll down the right-hand side until you see season 12 customers. And when you do that, then what will happen is you will get kind of the notes that I'm going through today, all right? So I'm going to go, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see S12, E9 through 12, okay? Season 12, episodes 9 through 12 are podcasts. So this would be considered podcast 9 if I was doing this on a radio station. It's not. I'll give you a podcast number in a minute. So let's start here. One of the things we did when we developed this, and if you were with us last Tuesday or Monday 2 weeks ago, you know this, but I'm going to do it anyway. We designed 3 tracks. We looked at the economy and we said, things are not going to get better anytime soon. Now, there's a difference of opinion of whether the United States or the world is in a recession. Trust me when I tell you is that we're going to have a tough 2 years of economics, regardless of where you're at on the globe, with maybe the exceptions of Australia, which does not have a huge sovereign debt, or India, where the forecasted growth is for 8%. For the rest of us, there's going to be a tough 2 years. So taking my last 5 recessions that I've lived through, and 4 I had businesses in, we built a model for how do you not only get through a recession, but how do you come out stronger? So there are 3 tracks. This is track 3. So I'm going to do the first 2 quickly and then drill on this. The first track, number 1, is own your numbers. You got to get on top of all of the major numbers that drive cost and profitability, right? Or you could say revenue and cost leave profitability, however you would like to phrase it. but you got to know your numbers. We do that on Monday. On Tuesdays, the second track is operations. Okay, you know your numbers. So the way to look at it is you work on a balance sheet. So there's two ways to help out your balance sheet or manage it. One is reduce your cost. So on Tuesdays, and last Tuesday we did this in the same format, is that we had you look at how do you become the lowest cost producer, not price. Price is a separate issue, but how do you build it better, faster, for less, so that you either have a better margin than your competition, or given where the world is headed, you're going to have reduced revenue. How do you hold the margins that you have? The third track, which is what we're doing today, has to do with customers, because gaining new sales is going to be difficult. I'm not telling you don't try to bring on new customers, but that's going to be a little bit more difficult. It's going to be lower margin work. Your smart move is go after your best accounts and do what you've got to do to hold them. And that's the topics that we're taking today. So this started off, we talked in the first show on holding your best accounts. And the issue starts with having a database relationship with your customers. Now, what do we mean by a database relationship? All right, so I'm going to, if you're there, just click that one and it'll take you into all of the show notes. And so basically, you're looking to measure customer enthusiasm. Now, a lot of people use customer loyalty. A lot of people use customer satisfaction. This is not a play on words. I think enthusiasm is probably the best term. How enthusiastic are they to do business with you, which is all encompassing. It has to do with how enthusiastic are they about the things that they buy, the product or service. Does it meet the promise that you made when you made the sale? But also number two is how user-friendly is the product or service that you sold them, and how are you to do business with? And so I want to measure that. Now, I don't know where you stand in your ability to measure what's going on in the in your client organizations, but you got to start somewhere. So if you got a CRM system, you got a good start. And the idea here is, how much data don't I have? How much data don't I have that I have to fill in? What picture can I draw? Because I really believe a couple of things. Number one, customer service is not a random act of kindness. I'm sure you've heard this from me many years before, many shows before. I actually was part of the author team on Raving Fans when that came out about 25 years ago, and we built a pretty sophisticated and very proven methodology for improving service. And one of the things that hit me with that is customer service is nothing more than upselling. You are not servicing your accounts. You're not going to hold those accounts, and you're certainly not going to sell them anything new. And so if I improve that relationship, that's an upsell. And in good times, it's about 20% of the cost of acquisition of a new account. In bad times, it's probably even less. Okay. So you got to understand it's got to be a data-based relationship. Now, when we talk about data, what are we talking about? Well, two types of data: quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative, I'm going to talk about right now. Those are the numbers. And the reality is, why you need numbers is that, how do I compare, let's say you're doing time series. I'm looking at where we are today, tomorrow, next week, or last month, this month, next month, or last quarter, this quarter, next quarter. Having numbers makes it easy for you to do some statistical work, which you need to do. So the quantitative is very important. Now, it's a skeleton. It isn't the only thing. So you look at things like point of sale data collection. Do you have any? If you do, wonderful. If you don't, then is it possible? Now, point of sale at a cash register would be different than point of sale in a service relationship. But what happens when you sell? What happens when you service? Are you collecting data there? Number two is to do periodic surveys. And periodic surveys can be reactive and proactive. And what I mean by that is, reactive is incident based. In other words, something happened and the customer is either not happy with you or very happy. Well, it'd be good data to collect. And proactive is where you're on a routine basis, you're taking pulse of the customer. Now, how do you build those surveys? By the data you have or the data that you don't have. What holes and gaps do you have? And then last one, and this depends upon the business that you're in, but you can do an organizational survey, all right, or an organizational assessment. that looks at the entire organization. So those are the three. Quantitative is necessary because it gives you the ability to compare over time. It gives you the ability to run do some statistical work on this, and you can basically. This is so simple. You can basically buy a app for Google Sheets or for Microsoft if you use an Excel, and put it in and run the numbers. You can do regression analysis, and what you're looking for one or two things, or maybe both. But typically, you're either looking for cause and effect. In other words, when A happens, then B happens. Okay. Or you're looking for correlation where you can't prove that one equals the other. So what you're looking for here is you're looking for, okay, every time A happens, what happens to B? And if you got a positive correlation of 75%, then it means when I do A, the probability is that I'm going to get this response 75% or greater of the time. It could be positive or it could be negative. So positive would be, let's say, depending upon how you word the survey, I'm very happy. Negative could be I'm very unhappy. But quantitative is absolutely critical. Now, when we come back from the break, what we're going to be doing is we're going to hit up on the qualitative stuff, and then I'm going to move on to the next piece. So let me get out before I get crashed by the computer. You're listening to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. I am live at a rest stop in outside of Tallahassee, Florida. Thanks for joining, and we will be right back. What the hell's going on here? Okay, where are we here? All right. So apparently we have a malfunction in the system. Sorry for that. For some reason, we're not broadcasting live on the network. And so what I've done is we're no longer going to pay attention to that. I'm going to be, ah, let's see here. There we are. All right. So I'm not so really sure what's going on here. We should be picking up a signal, but we're not. So I'm going to go ahead and stay with my broadcast here with you guys. So the second piece here is we talked about the qualitative, and the way to do that is go to ibgr.network, go to resources, mouse over that, you'll see show notes. When you get to show notes, scroll down the right-hand side, you see names of hosts, and you see seasons, and click season 12, okay? And if you click season 12, what will pop up is the shows that we're talking about here, or if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, which hopefully you are, you'll see show notes, and you'll see the link. And I'm going to finish up the lowest one on the list, which is from season 12 and episode 9 through 12, and that has to do with data. Now, the next one is on qualitative data, And what we did here is we talked about, okay, what I want is also to collect comments. The qualitative data is the muscle. If you look at numbers, quantitative data is the skeleton, and the flesh, the tendons, the muscles, the things that make it work is the qualitative data. And you've got point of sale, you got focus groups, and you can go with an executive advisory group to help you there. Okay, so those are the things that you can do. Now I want you to move on to the next one. And if you go up, if you're at the bottom, you're going to be looking at season 12, and this is going to be episodes 21 through 24. And if you open that up, this is say, okay, let's start at the beginning. Let's face it, nothing else matters except the promise gap. And what happens is that when we did the analysis, when we've been building the Raving Fans model, we did an analysis of customer enthusiasm, which is really what we're trying to generate, where customers are enthusiastic to buy, and they become brand ambassadors for you. Is that we found there were 5 gaps. 4 of them are internal, because one of the lessons around customer service is this, and is that all service is inside out. In other words, the service that goes on inside the organization will equal the service you get on the outside. If there is no structure of the organization, the employees are mistreated, there are no clear goals, they're not rewarded or held accountable for customer service, guess what the customer is going to experience? So here what I did is I said, okay, let's take the 5th gap, which is the gap between what you promise the customer and what they receive in the interface with the individuals. We started there. And so the promise gap is basically nothing more than between the branding of your company, the marketing materials that you put out there, the engagement in the sales force, and then they close the deal is what are the expectations that they have at that moment in time, that what they're going to receive, whether it's a product or service. Okay, and as I talked about in the previous episode, what that means is that we're talking about whether or not the product or service does what it's supposed to, has the features, provides the results, etc. Then number 2 is how easy it is to use. In web terms, we call it UX, user friendliness. And then the third one is how are you to do business with. So what we talked about, okay, so when I look at promise, promise is based upon what we've set up, and in those 3 areas, and I'm just scrolling my notes here. And so I'm now at episode 23, gap 5. And so what we found is that this is kind of like a house. If you deliver on promise most of the time, and I'm saying 95% of the time, you're going to win the game. All right, so it's all about promise, but none of us run a perfect organization. None of us run an organization that's 100% right every single time. Doesn't happen. And so recovery now becomes important, and that is the second issue. Now, let me say a couple things about recovery. Number 1 is it can be one of the greatest tools that you have on customer service and building the experience with people to say, hey, these are really a service company, because I'm going to give you an example in a moment, but you cannot do a lot of it. Okay, it's got to be infrequent. So let me spell out what I'm saying. Take 2 companies. Company number 1 has got 100% reputation in terms of sales. In other words, sales, or I should say quality of products and services. Every time they buy from you, it does exactly what you promised it's going to do to get the results that they purchased it for. You're easy to do business with. The stuff is easy to use. And then that's company A. And then company B, what you have in company B is that they are about 95, 96, 97% there. They don't quite reach you in terms of 100%. But with those people, their recovery is awesome. Now, I know this is more of a United States story, and it's a little bit old, but think about Domino's Pizza years ago. Domino's Pizza used to give you a guarantee. And what was the guarantee? The guarantee was the pizza showed up in 30 minutes or less, or the pizza was free. A great recovery strategy. In fact, you wanted them to screw up. Now, they knew they could honor it because they, if they offered the guarantee, they looked at the service area you called from, they got your address, and they knew that within 20 minutes they could deliver the pizza. So they had a recovery system that was foolproof. So the deal here is that if you're company B, and let's say 96, 97% of the time you're awesome, and then you've got that, that 2 to 3% you're not, but you got a killer recovery strategy, which of those two companies do you think has a better service reputation? All right. Now the answer to that, I think I made it obvious, is that company A with 100% reputation is not the one that wins that race. The race is won by the one who had great recovery occasionally, because the problem is if you recover all the time, it says you don't have your act together, and recovery is typically expensive. It costs you some money to recover. Okay? So, deliver on promise, which is reliability, responsiveness, which is recovery. What else comes into there? Well, the other things that you get assessed now, if you don't deliver on promise, recovery or responsiveness. Now, next comes what we called assurance, and that is, am I dealing with competent, empowered personnel? Because the last thing you want is the person who's on the front line, who's dealing with the complaint, to have to say things like, "Oh, I don't know, I'll have to get my manager involved." You don't want to do that. You want to have somebody there who can fix the problem on the spot, because that's where the battle is won. If it's got to get booted up the organization, what happens? Well, pretty soon you want free round trip tickets around the world to make you happy. When if somebody could have fixed it on the spot, it could have been a relatively inexpensive fix. And so the competence of the people, you have people who are smart enough to fix the problem, and they have the authority to back it up. And all of you that have had jobs where you were given a great deal of responsibility, and then however, you didn't have a lot of authority, you know what I'm talking about. That was leadership by begging. Well, it's kind of the same thing here. They're in a leadership role. They're trying to manage the relationship. And then the last part of this is empathy. The people need to feel as if you value your business, and if you screw up, they need to feel as if, hey, you actually feel bad about it. Because a lot of places, they kind of, well, we're sorry, but there's no empathy. So here's what I want you to get from that. Deliver on promise. Have a killer recovery strategy for the times it doesn't have. Train your people to be able to problem solve with the customer to come up with a solution that makes the customer happy, but does not kill your financials. Okay, and they have the authority to do that. And then finally, is make sure that everybody in the organization treats customers in a way that the customer understands. One, we value their business, and number two, if we make a mistake, then how do we deal with it? Okay, so I think we're getting pretty close to that. So that's what we learned from doing the Raving Fans process years ago, and it was a great book. Talked about the 3 secrets. Basically know who you are, know what the customer wants, and deliver plus 1%. And it's a pretty interesting study, because what their hypothesis was when Ken Blanchard and Sheldon Bowles put the book together was that first thing you got to do is decide who you are and what you're selling. Then number 2, you can make it. Then you look for customers. Now, some of us have businesses. Let's say you're a software programmer, where you can say, I can do anything. Let's find customers and decide what we want to be. But I think for most small businesses, you've already made the decision what you want to sell. You've got to solve the problem that all of us got to sell in marketing, and that is, what do I sell, to whom, and how? And if you don't have the sales that you're looking for, then basically it's tied up there. Who you're selling to, what you're selling, how you're selling. And if you don't have the numbers you're looking for, go back and check those out. And I can assure you that when you start the business, when you start out, those numbers are, when you start out, let me say it this way. When you start out, you don't have a really good handle on it, so you start wide. And over time, you begin to collapse and collapse and collapse and collapse. And then finally, you get it down to what I'm selling to whom and how to sell it. And that whom question is absolutely the most critical. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this to break. And we're no longer constrained by the radio station. I hate to say that, but the way it's looking to me is that, in fact, we are not getting our signal through, and I'm not really sure and we got a great backup show going on with Rico Osera, who is our new video partner. But with that, let me disconnect here. And don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the last one, and then I'm going to be looking to engage you in some questions. So you're listening IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. I am your host today, doing this live from inside my car at a rest stop just outside of Tallahassee, Florida. And when you run a 24/7 operation, here's the deal. You're never on vacation. All right, so all of you out there, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take just a sec here to pull up the notes. Now, if you've got any questions, anything you want to ask, there's two ways of doing it. One is go to the show notes. If you're listening to this after the fact, go to ibgr.network, and it's in the notes here, so you can see my notes. But go to ibgr.network, go to resources. When you see resources, mouse over it. You'll see show notes, click it, and then as a quick search on the right-hand side, you'll see it's pretty long. And we have a search by author or host and a search by season. We are in season 12. So if you go click season 12, then you'll have the 3 shows that I'm referencing here. All right, so since I'm no longer constrained by what's going on at IBGR, and we'll work that bug out. It may be this headset is not getting picked up. I don't know. It says so here, but on my app, but it's not there. Okay. Now, if you don't have any questions, let's rock and roll onward. So we're going to start our next segment. This is our 3rd segment of today's show. And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be taking this to the 3rd one, the one we did last week. So if you're at ibgr.network and you go there and you go to resources on the navigation bar all the way to the right, and then you mouse over resources, you see show notes, click show notes. After you click show notes, then go ahead and hit season 12. And when that pops up, this is one that's the top of the queue. This is last week's show. So it'll say S12, that's season 12, episodes 33 to 36, Holding Your Best Accounts, which is the track we're working on, and The Power of Recovery and Good People. So I kind of laid this out a little bit here. But here's some numbers to consider. Number one is, and these are old numbers, but they're true, 96% of unsatisfied customers don't complain, they just don't come back. And so one of the things that you got to understand is if you have a reactive complaint system, you're going to be in serious trouble because nobody, quite frankly, most people don't complain. There's a few that do, and they're the ones that usually get taken care of. The old joke about the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So anyway, 96% of them won't complain. They'll just move on and buy from somebody else. But here's the real bad news. For every one of those, on average, they will tell 9 other people. In other words, instead of having good stories out there about your company, and we all know the power of word of mouth, you're going to have lots of bad stories. And on average, each person will tell 9 people. Now, we don't know the percentage of how many will tell bad stories, but you think about it yourself. If you get bad service from somebody, you may not run around and go, no, don't ever buy from them. But if a friend comes to you and says, well, we're thinking about buying X, how many of us will say to a friend, well, don't go to so-and-so? Let me tell you why. All right, so now, customer loyalty long-term is built upon recovery. Now, previous episode, what we did is we talked about how critical it is to deliver on promise. You will go broke if you're recovering all the time over everything, and it will hurt your reputation. Recovery is a powerful tool if and when it's used sparingly. All right, which means you got to have your systems under control. That means when you market or sell, I know that we have a tendency to expand, all of us, on what is the deal of the offer. But the bottom line here is that what you've got to do is you got to make sure that if you say you're going to deliver it, you're going to deliver it. All right. So we can't have them looking around. So let's take a look at that. And I'm doing the same thing you should be doing. I'm opening up that on my computer here, sitting on top of my stick shifter. All right. So when delivering on promise fails, your recovery process becomes paramount. We said that it's an opportunity to show how service oriented the firm is. In other words, if you say customer is number one, And a lot of companies do that. And then when you do business with them, that is obviously not true. You would be better served. You'd have a better service reputation if you took down customers number one and took it down and did nothing else for the company, because you already made a promise that you can't honor. And by the way, each one of these have a podcast, so you can see, for example, episode 33, there is a summary, and then you can click to the corresponding podcast. All right, now, so let's talk about recovery starts with policy. I said this in the previous one, I'll say it again, is that customer service is a way of life. It's an ethos or an ethic. It is a process. You're not going to win the customer service battle at the front if you haven't done your homework. Because I remember we have turned down, when we come out with Raving Fans, there's a story for you. When we come out with Raving Fans, one of the things that we did is that we were asked to do customer service training. And in a lot of places, we turned down the work. And I'll tell you why. They had customer service problems, and they said it is the frontline personnel. That's the reason why we have customer service problems. Well, that's not the reason that you have customer service problems. Yes, that is the effect. That's what you see. But the causes of your customer service is not the frontline employees. And in fact, it's an insult, because I'm going to bring people in and I'm going to train them basically with smile training and some listening techniques. And they're effective. But understand, if that frontline employee didn't do it and can't fix it, and the organization can't get its act together, what the hell are you doing? Because here's what's going to happen. They're going to treat, excuse me, they're going to treat the customer the way they get treated. One of the things that we found out when we were doing our initial work to set this up was that we found that what we could do in all honesty, we could measure the employee enthusiasm or the employee engagement or the employee satisfaction, whatever you want to call it. We could predict positive correlation in around the 80% mark of how the employees were treated. Their perception of the organization is what, in fact, the customer received. I didn't have to do customer satisfaction surveys to find out what the customers thought. I did it with employees, and I can predict with reasonable certainty what we're going to get. So this issue of recovery starts with policy is that I have to understand that one of the most critical things I can do in my business, there are two. There's horizontal alignment and there's vertical alignment. Vertical alignment is getting people on the same page for what the business is doing and the business plan and all that. Put that aside for right now. Horizontal alignment means that I got to align all my processes that have something to do with delivering the product or service that the customer buys, and I have to align those with what the customer wants. And the way that I do that is I work backwards. I start with the customer and what are we promising the customer in order to get the sale, and then I got to work backwards to make sure that we as a company can in fact do that. In other words, this is not a blatant lie on our part. This is actually something that we can do as a business. And if we can't, then we better fix that before we do anything else. And so once that's done, then this issue of policy, we write standard operating procedures for how those jobs are done. Because what I want is the frontline employee, when they've got a problem, they turn inward to the company, they're not in a scenario where it's just them. In other words, there is no help or support inside this company for my problem. I got to fix it myself. Because when you put the employees in that spot, let me tell you what comes out of it. They're feeling heat, they're feeling tension, they're getting beat on for things they didn't do. So how do you think they're going to get out of it? They're going to agree with the customer. And they're going to say, you think that's something? Let me tell you what happened last week. Because they're feeling the tension, the pressure. The customer is directing their venom at them, and they don't feel like they're in a company that supports them. They're going to agree with the customer. And so the front line, when it comes to situations like this, the front line does not lie. They tell the truth. So I want to make sure that my processes and my policies are set up to where it is clear, okay? It is absolutely clear that we are dedicated to the customer. Now, recovery must happen immediately. Let's take that one. What I need to do is I need to make the solution space that the employee operates within to fix it on the spot big enough that they can do that, but small enough that they don't do weird things. And I'm not saying they're going to do weird things. They're not going to harm the company financially on purpose. I'm not going to say that because typically they don't know what is going to harm the company. So what I want to do is I want to say, okay, here is your solution space. Anything in that space, and that could be take backs, it could be discounting, it could be another offer. I don't care, credits on a new purchase. You decide because every business is different, but you give them a toolbox, a solutions box that they can use to give that customer. Now, the other thing I'd be very clear about, when is it that they have to talk to somebody above them? And I would keep that very, very simple, very, very clear, and also very, very limited. Now, the other thing you need to do with the employees, okay, is that you need to check their decision making. So let's go into that. Employee does something and they fixed it on the spot and they tell you. And then what happens is you go, oh, that's not a good decision. Don't flame them. Here's the approach. I've seen this work in a lot of successful companies that use recovery as their primary strategy on customer enthusiasm. They go to the employee and say, okay, take me through your thought process. How did you arrive that solution was the best decision? Now, two things are happening here. One is you weren't there. This actually might have been a good decision. And you don't know that until you get all the details. So, kind of keep your powder dry here for a second. So get them to explain it. Now, more than likely, what you're going to find is in the process, they didn't consider some things, or they made a bad decision. And so the way to deal with that, say, okay, I appreciate you handling that. On the other hand, next time you're in that scenario, here's some other things I'd like you to consider before you make that decision. So I don't want to flame them unless it's, they gave them $1 million. Let's not get ridiculous. But let's just say that it's a good employee who made a mistake. Don't flame them. Understand their thought process, because more than likely they didn't consider something, or they didn't consider it correctly. And now what you can do is to say, okay, next time you're in that spot, here's what I want you to do. Here's the things, or not do, excuse me. Here's the things I want you to consider as you arrive at the decision. And what you're going to find is that is going to be the type of training that you really want, because, I hate to say this to you, but most employees are unsupervised. They're making decisions all day, every day, on what they're going to do. And so unless you watch them all the time and they got to run every decision by you, they're making their own calls. So this teaching decision making is absolutely critical for any job where the employee has the ability to make their own judgment without supervision. And so that is where I would take that. So those are the ones that we've covered so far. Now, where are we going to go next week? Okay. Next week, we're going to be back on the radio at our normal time. And what we're going to be talking about there, and I'm just scrolling down to next week's notes, is there's the promise gap, there's recovery. And what we're going to be talking about next week is how to take the relationship to the next level, because there's a critical piece as we close out today. And I greatly appreciate everybody listening or watching. I guess watching is more than listening, and we'll figure out what this bug is. Apparently, I'll probably have to use a professional mixing board, which means there are going to be no more broadcasting from the car until I figure out what's wrong. But the next level, you see, what we've been talking about so far is all of the preliminaries to get your act together. Now what's going to be next is, okay, if I'm going to hold my best accounts, knowing what I just said, how do I take the relationship to the next level? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how to analyze with the data that you have, how to analyze where you are with the customer. Also, number two is I'm going to talk about what data don't you have that you need to have in order to make some of these decisions. So this is really going to be a data collection and conversation. Because if I want to take it to the next level, think about it this way, and this is going to be my close to you, is that, and we're doing this on our Tuesday on track 2 when we talk about lowest cost producer. One of the things that we're assuming that you're doing as you're working on your customer relationship, which is to hold as much revenue as you can. On the cost side, what we're trying to do is reduce the cost of what you're doing for the customer to give you a more healthy margin. Now, what can you do with a customer if you've got a better margin on what you're doing? Here's the story I'm going to end with, because I want you to think about it. And that is, you've been with a cell carrier now for 10 years. At the same cell carrier, you get your phones from them, etc. And another cell carrier comes into your market and offers you the same coverage, the same features, no difference, and they offer you a better deal to leave. So you make the decision. It's substantial enough. The cost of switching is not that high. I make the decision that I'm going to move over to those suppliers. Okay. And then the company you have right now comes back to you and says, "Oh, wait a minute. I'll match their offer. In fact, I won't just match their offer. I'm going to beat it." What are you thinking? Well, I can tell you what I'm thinking. Where you been? That's what we're going to pick up on in next week's show. So I greatly appreciate all of you on Facebook and LinkedIn for tuning into the show. My name is William Eastman. I am a managing partner here at IBGR. I'm also the co-founder along with Donna Cundy. And we've started this series. This is a test. Every week we're going to be doing a live webinar. This is the 4th week of the season. We did customers today. Next week on Monday we're going to be doing operations. The week after we're going to be doing financials next week, operations the week after, and then 3 weeks from now we're going to be doing this again. So I greatly appreciate you listening or watching the video, and all the materials are there. Anything that you need to start, grow, or exit your business, come to the website. There's a search bar on every page. Type in what you want. You'll find it, and it'll be better than any search you do on Google or Bing. I'll guarantee it, because there's no clickbait around here. So William Eastman, signing out. Have a great day.